Hello and welcome to Rolling with Two. I'm Will and with me is the meeple herself, Sarah. And today we're doing a two-player perspective of Dune Imperium. Sarah, why don't you tell us a little bit about this game?
All right. Dune Imperium is a deck-building worker placement game with some area control set in the world of Dune. So now let's talk a little bit about the rules changes for two players.
So for two players, you will have House Hegel, represented by Banana Bot Man. He will utilize a deck of cards, which you will have to change based on whether or not you're playing it with one or two players, because some cards do get removed. And so when you're done, you have a deck of cards. On a player's turn, the first player will take their turn as normal. Then, after that first player goes, Banana Bot Man, or House Hegel, will always take an action after that first player. And the way he does that is by flipping up a card, adding soldiers to the battlefield or the barracks as necessary, as well as blocking up a space on the board. Then, once everybody has done their various actions, it's time to figure out who wins the combat. So for House Hegel, they'll flip up another card and add surprise attack to that combat to figure out who wins. Other than that, that's all the changes for two players. Now, what are the issues that we have with this game?
Okay, so the issues we have with the Automa is that it doesn't play by the same rules as the players. It does not pay resources to take up a space. And this can feel bad for a player who has been saving up, and it can take several rounds to get all the resources you need for a very expensive spot. So if you've been spending a lot of time to do it and you're the second player in a round, the bot goes before you and it just takes that spot without any notice, it can feel very very bad. You can be very frustrated with that experience of, wow, the game just pretty much told me not to play. And it doesn't have the same feeling, I think, as it would if you were playing with more people, where you could see other people, amassing resources. So I have a general idea of what Will could possibly do, because resources are a visible thing that everybody at the table can see. So that is one aspect that I didn't particularly care for.
Now, the other issue that I found in a two-player game is deck building is a big part of the game, because that's how you take your actions, do your action selection, and how you generate money or resources for paying for stuff in the game. And to acquire new cards, there's a row of 5 cards. Now, in a two-player game, that doesn't get refreshed unless somebody purchases one of those cards. And sometimes that just doesn't happen.
Yeah.
So therefore, you don't actually get into the real, what I'd feel the meat of the game is in a two-player game, because you just don't see a lot of those cards being moved out of the row by being purchased. And there's no mechanism to automatically move them away, because heck, you could be saving up for that big cost one, and it'd feel also very bad if it just left the row. So you're stuck with this issue of you can only see how much you can afford, which sometimes isn't much.
Yes. Now, the good news is there are some things that the game does well. The bot is easy to use. It's easy to implement because it is just a deck of cards and a extra set of player pieces. So you flip up that card and you put pieces out on the board. So it takes very little time. It's very easy to use. You just shuffle and go. So yeah, that is pretty simple, and that's a good thing.
Yes. The other good thing about this particular bot is that it does provide the tension that you see in more player counts, because that little bit of added chaos of unpredictability does make a very dynamic board.
Right.
So it does bring in that dynamic feature to the playing surface.
Right.
So that's where we're at when it comes to issues we have with the game. Things that work well, things that not so much. But the bigger question is, how's the accessibility?
All right, so for the accessibility, one of the biggest things about this game is that your cards have to be kept secret. And there is a lot of information on these cards. This is actually one of the simpler cards. It just has a lot of icons and it doesn't do very much. But you can still have a lot of information on a card. And so if your vision is not that good, you might have trouble telling icons apart or reading the text where there's text with icons in the row of the text. That could be challenging, especially since you're supposed to keep, it secret. So that could be very difficult. But you had a idea of how to overcome the hidden information that can't be seen as well.
Yes, because I think the icon in particular I had an issue with was the sword icon, because it's a dark colored icon on a fairly dark background. The colors even blend.
Right, it's a red icon on a red background, and at the bottom the text is red on black, which is usually problematic.
So what I would suggest as a solution is to create a card list with the name of the card, because that is clearly distinct at the top of every card.
Right.
And then, along with the name, say what it does. So therefore, you have it in clear black and white off to the side as a reference material, what the card is, what the card does, so when it pops up in your hand, you can see it and reference it.
And just to keep going on that visibility issue, I think overall, even with the board, contrast could have been better. I know with the theme and the world of Dune, they chose a lot of muted colors, but that means you're doing muted colors on muted colors. They just happen to be a couple of shades darker, but that can actually be very difficult to see, especially on the board when you're at a distance, and if you don't have really strong lighting. Even people who are just wearing, normal glasses with normal either farsighted or nearsighted issues, or even if you can see fully but you have poor light, there could be color issues of not being able to read the locations because of the poor contrast. So that could be difficult for a wider variety of people.
Yeah. Now, on the other hand, the components, they did an excellent job for accessibility. When it comes to things like coins, spice, and even water, they even use different sizes. So coins and spice will have like 1 and 5 value, with the 5 being the larger size. Water is just always a droplet, but it's easy to pick up, grab, know what you have in your hand without even seeing it.
Yeah, it's very distinct. There's rounds, there's hexes, and then there's 2 different sizes between those. So that is very easy to tell. And all the other pieces, there are cubes. Everybody has cubes. So the only thing I can think of is during cleanup of each round when the combat is over, you would need a sighted person to give cubes of the right color back to the person who may not be able to tell the colors apart.
As well as the player pieces that are on the board.
Right, because the agents are also all the same shape, just different colors depending on the player color.
Now, that will do it for us for accessibility. Yeah. What do you think in terms of a 2-player game experience? How does Dune Imperium measure up? Does it give you what you want for a 2-player?
For me personally, and people who also basically is if you don't like the Automa, you don't like how it works, like how we described it, you're not going to like this game because it's going to greatly impact everything you do. If you have absolutely no problem with being surprised and cards flipping up and saying, oh, you can't take the space this round, then you're not going to have an issue, and you might really enjoy this game. So I can't give a very clear yes or a no on the 2-player experience. It's really going to depend on how much you like or dislike Automas in general, or bots in general, and this specific one.
As far as me, I'd say the game in a 2-player aspect is kind of middling.
Yeah.
It's a bit sluggish to see the various aspects play out with the cards that you can purchase, because you just don't have a lot of purchasing power. The cards don't cycle very readily, and by the time they do, the game's over, because again, it's only like 12 points you're going to.
Right.
So I've seen games that play with similar mechanics play a lot better at 2 players. So I don't think this is something that 2-player specific gamers are going to need to go out of their way to pick up.
Agreed.
Now, if you're big on the IP, that's a totally different story. Check out our other review because we do have opinions on that as well. Now, as far as accessibility goes, how well does this game do?
Again, I think I'd be kind of middling, but I think overall, especially if you're having vision issues, this one is really hard to recommend. You are going to have trouble reading the cards. You will have trouble manipulating stuff on the board. Now, granted, if you have someone to help you, then it's easier if you make yourself that reference sheet. That will definitely make it easier. I mean, the resources are great in that they are different, but unfortunately, that aspect alone is not quite enough to save it. So generally speaking, I would say no for accessibility. Don't go out looking for this, but if you can modify it or get help to modify it, then you would probably enjoy it.
Yeah, and I know I can play this game despite my vision disabilities through extra bits of effort and specialized equipment to help boost up contrast and enlarge text. However, I do know that does require an extra level of effort on my part just because of how I feel about the IP. So, yeah, I'm with Sarah. Not the most accessible game. It's part and parcel based on the artistic choices that make complete sense for Dune Imperium.
Oh yeah, it does.
But overall, can be a bit flat for someone seeking something that's easier to play.
Right.
So that will do it for us. If you need to get a hold of us on any of the social medias, where can they get us?
Rolling with 2, that's TWO on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and of course, here on YouTube. Please like and subscribe to our channel.
Yes. So, again, I'm Will. This is Sarah. And why could you ever be rolling with 1 when you can be rolling with 2?